Hi, my name is Nora Park and I'm 32 years old. In Dad's garage, trophies stared from a wall of dust. He set a brown envelope on the hood and smiled. Sign this, he said. Make your father look strong again. One ceremony and my marker's clear. Respect restored. I pushed it back. My life isn't collateral for bets. His jaw locked. Don't make me small in public. You're not a daughter. You're how I pay my debts. I reached for my keys. He started typing on his phone. The tip he sent wasn't to me. It was to immigration. I should have known his image had a price, and I was it. Dad curated respect like a museum, polishing names instead of truth. Photos of handshakes lined the hallway, every smile staged like proof. When I earned something, he called it expected. His wins were heroic. I learned to clap for him and vanish before questions started. Saturdays, I found crumpled betting slips beneath the truck's floor mat. He called them investments. Winners look reckless right before payday. Collectors texted. He muttered, "After the ceremony, this all clears." Ceremony meant mine. My signature paying debts I never touched. Marco arrived careful, cologne soft, promises rehearsed to sound kind. "Everything's covered," he said. "You'll be protected. Your father restored." Restored meant his standing at the shop, the church, the league. I wasn't a bride, I was PR with a heartbeat. Dad translated family first into don't make me look small. Boundaries were insults. Pauses were disloyal. Questions were public betrayal. Be useful, he'd say, tapping trophies like a metronome for obedience. People were watching. My life was the curtain he'd pull. He posted, "Back in business," then flipped a debt text face down. Image 8 consequence. I picked up the check in silence. At the clinic, I held strangers' stories steady through the day. At night, I held mine, careful not to spill anything. Sunday, an email arrived. Subject line cold as a hallway tile. Anonymous report. Fraudulent marriage arrangement involving Nora Park. It copied an alias that looked like mine after midnight. The body listed details only Dad and Marco would know. My stomach lurched. If rumors reached the clinic, clients would suffer. Dad texted, "Don't overreact, say yes and it all quiets." Yes would muffle the noise and bury me under it. Marco messaged, "We can make this easy. No one gets hurt." People say that when they've already chosen who gets hurt. I scrolled again. Timestamps, a location hint. Concerned citizen signature. Concerned about what? His markers, his seat at the men's table? I pictured the garage wall, trophies gleaming like obedient moons. I drove past City Hall. Stone keeps secrets other rooms forget. Somewhere between red lights, a plan stopped being a daydream. If he turned my name into leverage, I'd turn leverage into light. But his next move would make my name the evidence. I left that night with a duffel and a shaking breath. Aunt May opened her porch light like a small, stubborn son. "Stay as long as you need," she said. No questions asked. I slept on her couch, shoes beside me like sentries. In the morning, I powered down socials and changed my number. Silence wasn't surrender. It was a room I could lock. I wrote rules on a sticky note and stuck them high. Don't argue, don't announce. Document everything. Save it twice. Priya met me at a diner that didn't serve complications. "Keep screenshots with timestamps," she said. "Print headers so humans follow. We're explaining evidence, not teaching court," she added, eyes steady. Back at Aunt May's, the dusty printer coughed, then found rhythm. Pages warmed my hands. Subject received from. Dates that refused to blink. The chain pointed home to Dad's router, plain as handwriting. The alias copied looked like mine, but slept at his house. City Hall replied about scheduling. The visitor log remembered clearly. There they were, Dad and Marco, lingering on the stone front steps. Notes read, rehearsal, long conversation, gestures matching interview prompts. I laid betting slips beside debt texts, a neat, ugly collage. Read circles around due dates, balances, and after ceremony. He polished image to hide consequence. I would uncover it. Aunt May set tea down softly, like a hand on thunder. Marco agreed to meet in a strip mall cafe by the freeway. He arrived early, posture courteous, eyes skating past the extinguisher. "Nothing personal," he said. "Your father said you'd understand pressure." "Pressure isn't consent," I answered. "Who pays whom and when?" He blinked, then offered a smaller truth that still burned. "There's a consulting fee," he admitted. After the ceremony, to Daniel. "This keeps him respected," he added. "We all benefit." "By turning me into collateral," I said, benefiting from my absence. I paid for my coffee, kept the receipt, folded it twice. Receipts remember even when guilt decides to forget. That night, Priya labeled folders like girders. Headers, logs, payments, photos. We didn't argue about love. We organized the damage he curated. Aunt May hovered, passing highlighters like a nurse passing gauze. Color bled into margins. The story stopped pretending it wasn't bleeding. I printed Dad's post, back in business, and pinned it above debts. On another page, I wrote the sentence he used on me. You're not a daughter. You're how I pay my debts. It looked smaller in quotes, but heavier when dated and sourced. Words weigh different when they're nailed to roots and times. I stacked the proof, breathed, and let the room get quiet. Quiet wasn't empty. Quiet was evidence choosing where to stand. At the clinic, I kept showing up, steady as a railing. Between appointments, I drafted a plan that needed no permission. Step 1. Hold the mirror. Step 2. Invite witnesses. I drove past City Hall again, evening drying on the steps. Stone doesn't forgive, but it records. Footprints, rehearsals, exits. If he turned my name into leverage, I'd return it leveled. If he wanted an audience, I'd reserve the room and truth. I wasn't just surviving his story. I was writing mine. The envelope arrived Wednesday, polite and cream, like a neighbor. A summary letter, not advice, just dates, attachments, descriptions. It referenced an anonymous tip and attached the original form. The sender's alias looked like mine, tilted by one letter. I printed full headers, black ink steady as a pulse. Hop by hop, the trail marched home to Dad's router. Same ISP, same time window, same sleepy neighborhood IP. I circled each hop until the paper looked bruised. Second attachment. A transcribed voicemail to a public hotline. The words were careful. The rhythm wasn't. I knew it. He always paused on family, then clipped the next word. His old catchphrase surfaced, soft and rotten. People are counting on me. City Hall replied, efficient, unbothered, precise as a ledger. A visitor log with timestamps, camera notes in neutral voice. 2 males on steps, the clerk typed, dry as winter. Practicing answers. Phrasing consistent with interview guidance. The stills showed Dad and Marco rehearsing on the stone. Marco's hands mimed an oath. Dad shaped his mouth around yes. They laughed after one run, then reset for another. Practice made perfect, even for pretending. I opened Dad's public profile. A billboard pretending to be a man. There he was, shaking hands beside Chrome at the shop. Caption. We're back in business. Men with hats cheered in comments. Below it, same afternoon, a debt text he ignored again. Aunt May read beside me, glasses low, jaw set. Priya squared the pages. Sequence over story, she said. We won't argue feelings. We'll show the order of things. We layered proof the way a welder layers seams. Headers first. Denial lost oxygen by the second page. Then voicemail. His catchphrase circled twice in red. Then City Hall. Steps, gestures, choreography of fraud. Marco texted a single question mark, then a longer apology. I didn't know he'd go this far, he wrote. I panicked. There's always a moment before panic when truth is possible. He stepped over it. Tidy shoes, careful smile, eyes down. Night pooled at the edges of Aunt May's kitchen. She set soup gently, evidence of care in a bowl. Do it clean, she said. Let paper speak for you. Priya drafted an agenda that looked like a bridge. Titles, exhibit numbers, places to initial each handoff. We requested a small room at City Hall, neutral ground. I printed his sentence big and unkind, then centered it. You're not a daughter. You're how I pay my debts. I slid it between the handshake photo and the debt texts. I pressed the binder rings closed and felt the click. It sounded like a door remembering how to lock. Tomorrow, daylight. No whispers, no favors, just order. If he loved an audience, I would bring him one. The man obsessed with honor rehearsed perjury on the steps. City Hall gave us a small room and colder air. Fluorescence hummed. A projector blinked, impatient and bright. The clerk set a clipboard down, pen tethered like truth. An immigration representative sat back, hands folded, neutral. Aunt May took the corner. Priya squared the stack. Marco was early. Dad arrived loud. We're here to review a scheduling concern, the clerk said. Present whatever you have, one exhibit at a time. Exhibit A. Headers enlarged. Received from marching left to right. Hop by hop, the route returned to Dad's router. Time window matched his posts. ISP matched his address. The clerk initialed the corner, calm. Exhibit B, voicemail transcript and audio. His cadence, pause on family, clipped next word. On screen, the catchphrase circled. People are counting on me. The representative made a note and set the pen down. Exhibit C, visitor log and camera stills. On the steps, Dad coached Marco like choreography. Hands rehearsed oaths. Mouths shaped yes on cue. The clerk typed, observed, documented, attached to record. Exhibit D, transfer memo. Consulting intro, Marco to Daniel. Amounts redacted, dates visible. Below. Balances cleared after ceremony. Silence shifted. Dad stood. You're twisting this to humiliate your father. We fix family matters privately. Put the papers away. We tried privately, I said. This is public. He pointed at Marco. Tell them you asked first. Marco swallowed. I'm sorry, I paid Daniel, I panicked. Trouble, I said, is what happens to the person you use. Dad's voice hardened. You're ungrateful. I carried this family alone. You're not a daughter. You're why men doubt me. Final slide. His line in 20-point type, centered and plain. You're not a daughter. You're how I pay my debts. Beside it, the handshake photo. Beneath it, the debt texts. The clerk capped the pen. Scheduling is cancelled, she said. These materials are noted. She stamped the form. Dad tried one last turn at theater, palms up, wounded. You'd shame me like this? In front of strangers? Honor without honesty is theater, I said. I'm done performing. Your debts aren't my duty. I won't pay to be your daughter. Something left the room. Maybe his legend, maybe the echo. Marco whispered thank you to the floor and stepped back. Aunt May stood. Priya closed the binder. The rings held. Outside, the door clicked, neither slammed nor begged. We walked into daylight that didn't need an explanation. Exposing him was justice. Choosing me was freedom. By morning, the clerk's stamp traveled faster than denial. Whispers hardened. The shop's chrome reflected questions he couldn't dodge. Vendors stopped saying sir. Respect dropped its mask and didn't return. Marco stepped back, politely, then publicly, then permanently. He returned what he could and wrote an apology. Not perfect, but enough to stop whispers from hardening. Dad's feed went careful, then quiet, then mostly gone. His legend met daylight and lost volume on contact. At the clinic, I kept showing up, steady and present. Between appointments, I built a small lobby guide. Plain words on boundaries and digital safety for families. Aunt May watered plants. Priya said, leave folders empty. Finished isn't loud. It's a door that stays shut. Dad called once from a number that didn't know me. Attorneys answered, paid to be gentle and specific. His voicemail shrank. People are counting on me. No applause arrived. We met once on a bench near City Hall. I'm sorry, he said, practice, not change. I forgive you, I said, not your access. No loans, no introductions, no doors with my name. Your debts aren't my duty. I'm not your payment. He nodded, or the wind did it for him. Either way, the performance ended without an encore. That night I cooked too much and kept the leftovers. Peace isn't loud. It's the chair that doesn't scrape. Morning arrived on time. If you've carried a bill you never owed, I see you. If family first meant you last, rewrite the order. Your name isn't a coupon someone else can spend. You are not collateral for anyone's reputation. Have you faced pressure to save the family at your expense? Share one sentence below. Your words might hold someone steady. If this story resonated, consider subscribing and staying with us. You're not alone. Not here, not now, not anymore.
The late afternoon light spilled through my kitchen window, soft and golden, catching the edges of the crystal glasses I'd lined up along the counter. The dining table, rarely used, was dressed in white linen with a centerpiece of fresh lilies and roses I'd splurged on from the florist downtown. Their scent filled the air, subtle but warm, the kind of detail I hoped my mother might notice. In the corner, boxes from the catering company waited to be unpacked. The menu had taken me weeks to finalize each dish chosen for someone specific. Chicken parmesan for Mom, lasagna for Dad, grilled salmon for Haley, steak for Colin. I'd even ordered a triple-layer chocolate cake that cost more than my entire weekly grocery budget. I moved from room to room, straightening chairs, adjusting picture frames, running a cloth over already spotless counters. My little house, modest but tidy, felt almost grand today. It had to. We hadn't all been together in months, and I wanted tonight to be a reminder to them and to myself that we were still a family. The guest list was just us. No friends, no colleagues. I'd never liked big crowds, and my family always said they understood that. A small, private evening meant less noise, more space for real conversation. At least, that's what I told myself. In the quiet, I caught my reflection in the living room mirror. My hair was pulled back neatly, my sweater a deep green that brought out my eyes. Not glamorous, but presentable. I smiled, imagining the warmth of seeing them all walk through the door, the clink of glasses, the sound of laughter I believed would be shared with me, not at my expense. I checked my phone for the delivery confirmation. Everything was on schedule for Saturday afternoon, hours before the 5 p.m.'s arrival time I'd given them. I pictured us around this very table, plates full, wine glasses catching the light, my parents telling stories from when we were kids, my siblings teasing me in the harmless way families do. The image made me pause, a flicker of unease stirring in my chest for reasons I couldn't name. I brushed it aside and went back to arranging the silverware, determined to make every detail perfect. Somewhere, in the back of my mind, I believed that if everything looked right, maybe everything else would be too. It was close to midnight when I finally sat down on the couch, a mug of tea cooling between my hands. The house was quiet, the table still set, the scent of flowers lingering in the air. I opened my laptop intending to check a few work emails before heading to bed. Nothing more. That's when I saw an unread message in my inbox from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was short, almost plain for Marceline. For a moment, I hovered over the trash icon. Spam. I thought. But there was something about the simplicity of it, the deliberate way my name was typed out. That made me hesitate. My fingers tapped the trackpad, and the email opened. There were only 2 lines. Watch this video and find out how your family really treats you. No greeting, no signature. Just a single video file attached. My pulse quickened. I stared at the attachment, my cursor hovering over the play button. A dozen reasons not to click it ran through my mind viruses. Scams, bad jokes, but curiosity had already taken root. I clicked. The video player opened, the image grainy. Colors muted. It took several seconds for the scene to sharpen, and with each pixel that resolved, an uneasy heaviness settled in my chest. I recognized the kitchen first, bright cabinets and the scuffed wooden table at my sister's apartment. Around it sat my parents, Haley and Colin, wine glasses and beer bottles scattered between them. Their faces were flushed, their voices overlapping in drunken ease. I leaned closer, my hand tightening around the mug until it ached. The sound was low at first, then grew clearer as someone adjusted the camera angle. I could make out my mother's voice, light and casual, just before she took a sip of wine. We only really like Marceline when she sends us money. The words seemed to hang in the air, suspended between the screen and my ears, impossible to pull back. I didn't move, didn't breathe, as my father lifted his bottle in a mock toast and answered her. My father's laugh followed his toast, deep and careless, as if my life had been reduced to a private joke they'd shared 1,000 times before. "Yeah," he said, "the more money she sends, the more we like her." They all laughed loud, unrestrained, the kind of laughter that comes when there's no thought of consequence. Haley leaned back in her chair, wiping at the corners of her eyes. "Oh my God." "You're terrible," she said between giggles. "But seriously, it's so funny watching her try to dress up for things. She has zero taste. She looks pathetic in those outfits she picks out." My gaze dropped involuntarily to the sweater I was wearing, the one I'd chosen so carefully for tomorrow. Colin shook his head, grinning. "And I can't believe she's having her birthday at home instead of taking us somewhere nice. What's the point of having money if you don't spend it on us? She's probably just too afraid of big crowds," Haley added with a smirk. More laughter. Then Colin shrugged. "The best part is we don't even have to give her expensive gifts." "Honestly, I don't want to give her anything." Haley jumped in eagerly. "Right. She gives us way too little anyway. All she covers is rent and maybe throws me 100 or 2 extra. It's not enough." I felt my stomach twist. I sent her nearly 1,000 every month, on top of her rent. My mother nodded, as though approving a business plan. "We need to figure out how to hint she should take better care of her family, make her feel guilty about not doing enough." And then my father sealed it. He raised his bottle once more, eyes glinting, to our little ATM. The clink of glass rang in my ears. I didn't even realize my hands were shaking until the mug slipped from my grip and hit the rug with a dull thud. I sat frozen, the word echoing again and again, until the video finally ended and the screen went black, leaving only my reflection staring back at me. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the blank screen, the word ATM ricocheting inside my head. The ache in my chest was sharp, but it wasn't the familiar, dull hurt I'd learned to live with. This was cleaner, hotter anger that cut through the fog of years. I thought about the teenage shifts at the diner while my friends went to football games, the scholarships I fought for so my parents wouldn't have to pay a cent for my education, the freelance projects I took on instead of going to parties, every rent payment, every emergency transfer, every time I said no to something I wanted because they needed more. And for what? So they could toast to how much they liked me when the checks cleared. Confrontation would give them the stage. Let them twist my reaction into proof that I was overreacting. No silence would be louder. I opened my travel browser and typed one word, Hawaii. Flights left at 4 a.m., the morning of my birthday. Perfect. I booked the most expensive penthouse suite I could find in Honolulu, the kind of place I'd never have allowed myself to even dream about before. Next, I called a locksmith. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. I told him, change every lock. It's urgent. He took down the details without question. Finally. I pulled up the catering invoice. The total $800 flashed on the screen. I called the restaurant, confirmed the order, then changed the delivery address to the downtown homeless shelter. The coordinator on the other end sounded surprised, then grateful. I ended the call and sat back, feeling the faintest trace of something I hadn't felt in years, satisfaction. They'd show up expecting a celebration, but the door would be locked, the food gone, and I'd be thousands of miles away. The plan settled over me like armor, each step a quiet severing of the ties they'd wrapped so tightly around my life. The alarm went off at 2 in the morning, though I'd barely slept. My suitcase was already by the door, packed with clothes I'd chosen for no one's approval but my own. I dressed quickly, pulled my hair into a loose knot, and slipped out into the dark. Quiet street. The Uber driver didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer answers. The ride to the airport was silent except for the occasional turn signal and the hum of tires on pavement. By 4 o'clock, I was at the gate, boarding pass in hand, and for the first time in years, I was going somewhere without carrying someone else's weight. The flight was long, but strangely calm. I watched movies, sipped bad coffee, and let the steady roar of the engines drown out every lingering echo of their voices from that video. When we landed, warm Hawaiian air wrapped around me like something I didn't know I'd been missing. By the time I checked into the penthouse suite, the afternoon sun had begun its slow drop toward the ocean. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the view like a living painting, but my attention kept drifting to the phone in my bag. I knew what time it was back home. 5 o'clock. The first call came from my mother, her name lighting up the screen. Then my father, then Haley, then Colin, one after another. Relentless. The vibration on the nightstand seemed almost alive, rattling against the wood. I let each call go to voicemail. When the ringing finally stopped, the text messages began. We're here. Where are you? This isn't funny. Answer us. We're waiting outside. I scrolled through them slowly, imagining them standing on my porch. Confusion turning to irritation. Irritation to panic. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and then I attached the video their own words, their own laughter, and typed only one sentence, away from the toxic family. I hit send. For a moment, I watched the little delivered icon appear, knowing the message had landed in all the places that mattered. Then I powered the phone off completely and set it aside. The silence that followed was absolute, and I let it carry me into the next breath as I stepped out onto the balcony, the ocean stretching endlessly before me. The first morning in Honolulu, I woke to the sound of waves instead of my phone buzzing with another request for money. I lay in bed for a long time, just listening, letting the absence of demands sink into my bones. It felt unnatural at first, as if I'd forgotten to do something urgent. I filled my days with everything I used to tell myself I couldn't afford, not because I didn't have the money, but because I didn't believe I was worth spending it on. I ate breakfast on the terrace with the ocean stretching out in front of me, ordered room service just because I felt like it, and wandered through boutiques without checking price tags. By the third day, my skin was warm from the sun. My hair smelled faintly of salt water, and I'd stopped checking the time. I took long walks on the beach, let the waves catch my ankles, and let go of the voice in my head that measured every choice by how it might affect someone else. Evenings were slower. I'd sit in the hotel lounge with a glass of wine, watching strangers laugh and talk without thinking of the next bill I had to cover for someone else. For the first time in years, I didn't feel tethered to anyone's expectations. Still, the disbelief lingered. It was strange to realize I could go an entire day without a single interaction with my family and not only survive but feel lighter for it. By the sixth day, that strangeness had shifted into something sturdier. The constant hum of guilt that had lived under my skin for decades was quiet. In its place was a calm I didn't know how to name yet, but I knew I wanted to keep it. When I finally powered my phone back on, it was only to see who, if anyone, could still reach me. That was when I saw her message. Back home, I was still unpacking when a message from an unfamiliar number appeared. "Hi, Marceline. It's Elena. Can we meet just to the two of us? It's important." I'd always liked Elena Collins' girlfriend, though we'd never been especially close. Something in her tone made me agree without hesitation. We settled on a quiet cafe downtown the next afternoon. She arrived looking more nervous than I'd ever seen her, scanning the room before sliding into the seat across from me. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice low. I nodded, waiting. Her hands curled around her coffee cup. "I'm the one who sent you that video." For a second, I just stared at her. "You," she nodded. "That night. I was at Haley's place. I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, they were all talking about you laughing, calling you an ATM, making fun of your clothes. I started recording on my phone because I knew you'd never believe it otherwise. The memory of that grainy footage tightened my chest. Why, anonymously, I didn't want Colin to know, but after you cut them off, I started seeing him for what he really is. He didn't care about you losing contact. He only cared that his rent wasn't being paid anymore. So, I broke up with him. I felt a surge of unexpected gratitude. You didn't have to tell me this, but I'm glad you did." She hesitated before leaning closer. "There's something else. They're angry. Marceline, I've heard them talking about ways to shame you publicly posting things online, twisting the story so you look like the selfish one. They think if enough people believe it, you'll have to come back to defend yourself." The air between us seemed to sharpen. "Thank you for warning me," I said, steadying my voice. "I'll be ready for whatever they try." And for the first time since this all began, I knew I meant it. Elena's warning proved true within a week, the first time I saw them outside my office. I thought it was a coincidence. My parents stood near the entrance, pretending to look at their phones. But when I walked past without acknowledging them, my mother called out, voice trembling just enough to sound pitiable, "Marceline, please, just 5 minutes." I didn't stop. Security caught the exchange and escorted me inside, their eyes following me all the way to the elevators. Then came the messages through mutual friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly checking in, asking if I'd really abandoned my family. It was always the same story they were struggling. They didn't understand why I'd cut them off. They just wanted to talk. The guilt was neatly packaged, designed to slip past my defenses. When that didn't work, they got bolder. My bank called to alert me to multiple failed attempts to log into my accounts. The representative confirmed the attempts came from my hometown. I changed every password, set up new security questions, and added two-factor authentication. The thought of them trying to get into my accounts made my skin crawl. One afternoon, as I was leaving work, I saw Haley leaning against the hood of a car across the street. She didn't say anything, just smirked, as if daring me to approach. I walked to my own car without looking her way, heart pounding but steps steady. After that, security insisted on walking me out most evenings. At first, I resisted. Then I realized it wasn't about fear, it was about refusing to give them any opening to twist the narrative. No matter how many tactics they tried, I didn't respond. I wouldn't give them the argument they wanted, the chance to paint me as the aggressor. I went home each night to a locked door and the silence I'd fought for, holding on to it like the most valuable thing I'd ever owned. Elena's warning proved true faster than I expected. Within a week, they were waiting outside my office building, first my mother, then all of them together. They would linger near the parking lot, arms crossed, eyes scanning every person who came out. When I walked past without acknowledging them, the calls and texts from mutual friends started. "Your family is worried about you. They say you've cut them off for no reason." The messages were always laced with judgment, as if I owed an explanation to anyone who asked. Then came the bank alerts. Unsuccessful login attempts on my checking account, my savings, even my retirement fund. I changed every password, added extra verification, and still, the notifications kept coming. They were desperate enough to try prying into every corner of my life, but too careless to succeed. One afternoon, as I left the building, my father stepped directly into my path. "We need to talk," he said, his tone caught somewhere between pleading and command. Before I could respond, security intervened, guiding me past him and into the waiting car. It wasn't the first time that week they'd had to escort me. The effort they poured into chasing me was almost impressive. In a grim way, they'd never shown that kind of persistence when it came to anything else, only when there was money involved. I stayed silent through all of it. No texts, no calls, no public defense. The truth didn't need defending, and I wasn't going to step back into their arena just so they could twist my words. Each failed attempt on their part only solidified something inside me. Whatever they were planning next, I was determined to be ready. The drive to Lake Placid had always worked like medicine. Quiet roads, tall trees, my favorite playlist drifting through the speakers. I imagined the smell of pine when I opened the car door, the weight of the week dissolving as I stepped into my own space. Just 2 nights. Just me. I turned into the gravel driveway, tires crunching gently, but something was off. A red SUV I didn't recognize was parked beside the porch. A scooter leaned against the steps. The front door was wide open. I killed the engine and sat still for a beat. Maybe Reese dropped something off early. Maybe a neighbor laughter spilled from inside. Familiar, high-pitched, and out of place. I stepped out, keys still in hand, and climbed the steps. Inside the living room, my mother was arranging throw pillows like she was staging a real estate listing. My sister Celine walked in from the hallway with a bag of groceries, her youngest dragging a stuffed bear behind her. Marla looked up at me like I was the one interrupting. "You didn't say you were coming," she said flatly. "I wasn't planning to announce it. It's my house." Celine didn't even look surprised. She pulled a juice box from the grocery bag and handed it to her son. I glanced around the room. Suitcases in the hallway, a playpen in the sunroom, my books rearranged, my kitchen towels replaced. "I just needed the weekend," I said, voice steady. Marla crossed her arms. "They need more than a weekend. Celine and the kids are moving in. You've got your life in the city. This place makes more sense for them." Something in me paused like a door catching before the latch clicks. "You're moving them in." Without asking, Marla shrugged. "It's theirs now. You're not allowed here anymore." The words didn't land like a slap. They landed like silence, like something that had been waiting to happen. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I understood. I backed down the steps, the key still in my hand, now just metal with no meaning. By the time I reached the car, I had already decided I wouldn't fight them for the house. Not with words. Back in the city, I kicked my shoes off by the door and sat on the edge of the bed without turning the lights on. The hum of traffic outside felt jarring after the quiet of Lake Placid. My fingers still gripped the useless key warm from my palm. I dropped it into the drawer beside my bed, where it landed against receipts I hadn't been able to throw away. I pulled the blanket over my legs and reached for my phone, not to call anyone, just to scroll. Just to distract. But my photo gallery offered no comfort. There was the villa's porch at golden hour, the kitchen I'd designed tile by tile, the morning fog rolling off the lake. I closed it and opened my notes app instead. A few months ago, I'd started keeping a list. Not of expenses, but of things that didn't seem to count. Paid off mom's dental debt $6,300, covered Celine's divorce lawyer $3,000 flat, down payment and renovation on the villa, every bonus check over 4 years, groceries when mom forgot her wallet, babysitting Celine's kids while she reset emotionally. There was no line for thank you, no entry for we see you. I set the phone down and reached across the nightstand. My dad's old voice messages were still saved. I played the last one again, the one he'd left before his final hospital stay. His voice sounded tired but clear. You've always had a strong heart, kid. Don't let them confuse it for a bottomless wallet. And don't teach them that kindness means silence. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. If he were here, he'd have stopped them before they carried the first box inside. But he wasn't, and I hadn't. Maybe I'd taught them too well. That I'd show up, that I'd pay up, that I'd give up without needing to be asked twice. But the silence that followed this time didn't feel like surrender. It felt like planning. I reached over and opened my laptop, not to look at family photos, not to reminisce. I typed in the name of the attorney who'd helped me buy the villa. I'd been the responsible one since I was 9, not the oldest, just the one who never dropped the ball. When the electric bill was overdue, I figured out how to call the company from the landline and ask for a payment plan. When Celine lost her backpack, I gave her mine. When Mom forgot field trip forms, I forged her signature so I wouldn't miss the bus. By the time I turned 30, being the one who handled things wasn't a compliment. It was a sentence. I used to think they didn't notice, but they did. They just expected it. The last time I said no when Celine asked for help refinancing her car, I got 2 responses. Marla told me I was being selfish, that money made me cold. Celine texted, "You don't even have a family." What's it for? What was it for? I opened our message thread now, even though I knew it would sting. Marla's last text read, "They need it more. You're barely even there." I stared at those words. Not a question, not a request. A sentence carved like fact. I wasn't even a person in it, just a missing presence to be reassigned. What they called distance, I called breathing room. I'd built the villa because I needed a place that didn't ask, that didn't pull or shame or shift my worth depending on who needed what that week. And now they'd taken it as if all those years of showing up meant they were owed the one space I had made for myself. They'd forgotten something critical. I might have stayed quiet for years, but I hadn't stayed blind. I pulled up Lennox Hale's contact page and clicked Request Consultation. Then I attached a digital copy of the villa deed. Lennox Hale hadn't aged much since the last time I saw him. Still crisp shirt sleeves and sharp questions. He greeted me like I was another clean contract on his desk, not a woman 2 steps from severing her ties to her family. "I assume this is about the Lake Placid property," he said once we'd settled in. I nodded and slid the folder across the table. Deed copies, tax records, every invoice from the renovation. The folder was heavier than it looked, decades of quiet proof in paper form. "I want it secured," I said, "irrevocably. I want no one else to have access claim or leverage." He thumbed through the papers without speaking, then looked up. "Family matter?" I gave him a half smile. "Something like that." Lennox leaned back. "All right, we can transfer ownership to a nonprofit trust. I have clients who've done similar things, charitable housing orgs, ecological foundations. You retain lifetime use. They can't touch it without full legal pursuit, and even then, they won't win." I exhaled slower than I meant to. "We'll handle it cleanly." He continued flipping to a new page on his legal pad. But document everything. Messages, voicemails, access attempts. Anything that shows coercion or intent. I've got screenshots, I said. And a list. He glanced up. A list of everything I've paid for, everything they say I don't need. Everything they forgot came from me. Lennox gave a small, satisfied nod. Good. Because if this turns into a fight, we'll win it with facts, not feelings. I nodded and stood. I don't want to fight. No, he said evenly. You want distance. That's harder to argue with, and more permanent. Outside, the spring air cut through my jacket, but I felt strangely grounded, not angry, not bitter. Just done. I pulled out my phone and opened the smart home app. Then I texted Reese. You still good with Saturday? I've got a plan forming. We'll explain everything. Reese showed up in cargo pants and a hoodie that said trust issues are firewall enabled. He didn't ask many questions when I called, just asked for square footage and time frame. That's the thing about Reese. If you tell him the job requires creative deterrence, he starts loading his car with sensors and wires before you've explained who you're trying to keep out. We arrived just after noon on Saturday. The air was still damp from the night before, and the villa looked untouched, serene. Inside, nothing had been moved since I last left. They hadn't returned. Not yet. Full perimeter, Reese asked, unloading gear. Every room, every entry point. If it moves, I want the house to know. He grinned like I'd given him a birthday gift. By late afternoon, we had motion detectors in every hallway, programmable LED lights rigged to strobe in randomized pulses, and speakers hidden behind vents and inside wall panels. The voice assistant was custom scripted to issue warnings, escalate tone and loop phrases like unauthorized access detected, and vacate the premises immediately. Reese installed pressure-sensitive mats beneath the rugs. One step in the wrong spot, and water would gush from the faucets. Lights would flash, and a recorded message would declare, "This property is protected by responsive deterrence. You are not welcome." We tested it all, walking from room to room, watching it react like a sentient organism. It was brilliant, unsettling, legal. You know, Reese said adjusting a ceiling-mounted sensor, this is technically a smart home demo. Nothing illegal about home automation. It's just enthusiastic. I nodded, walking to the front porch. I hung the new sign beside the door, Demo House Voice AI activated. Enter at own risk. It was clean, minimalist, and polished like a product launch. Not a threat. When we finished, Reese packed up and gave me a thumbs up. If they stay more than 3 minutes, I'll be disappointed. They won't. I watched his car disappear down the road before opening the app on my phone. All systems green, cameras live, triggers armed. The villa had always been mine, but now it had a voice that sounded an awful lot like mine too. I slid the phone into my coat pocket and turned back toward the door, already knowing who would come next and when. They pulled up right on schedule Saturday at noon. The live feed showed Celine stepping out first, holding a casserole dish like it was a housewarming gift to herself. Her husband, Craig, followed behind with a cooler and 2 of the kids both dragging overnight bags. Marla climbed out last, adjusting her purse and scanning the porch with narrowed eyes. The sign caught her attention immediately. She walked over, read it, and scoffed. Demo House Voice AI activated. Enter at own risk. I watched her lips move as she turned to Celine and said something. Celine laughed loud and dismissive. Marla reached up, grabbed the sign by its screws, and yanked it clean off the post. She tossed it to the side like garbage. "This is our house now," she said. Loud, like she wanted the porch to hear. They didn't knock. Craig used the spare key I hadn't realized Celine still had. They walked right in, smiles and jokes, kids already bickering about which room would be theirs. I sat in my apartment, feet tucked under me, phone in hand. Everything had been ready since Thursday. I'd tested the sequences, checked every sensor, every audio file. All I had to do was wait. I muted the feed and left for a walk around the block. By the time I got back, the kids were asleep in the guest room. Celine and Craig were curled up in the master bed like they'd earned it. Marla was in the sunroom with a magazine and a glass of wine that I'd bought. At 1:55 a.m., I watched Marla turn out the last light and head toward the guest bathroom. I opened the app. A soft tone pulsed across the screen. Ready. My thumb hovered for only a second. Then I tapped Activate. The lights in the hallway flared to life, pulsing red and white. The living room speakers came on first. Unauthorized access detected. Bathroom faucets turned on. Kitchen lights flashed like sirens. Footsteps echoed through the speakers. Mine pre-recorded paced slow and steady. And upstairs, the hallway camera caught Celine bolting upright, already screaming. The villa responded exactly as we designed it to. Lights in every room strobed in unpredictable intervals, washing the walls in red, then white, then a pulsing blue that made the shadows look like they moved on their own. The hallway speakers looped my voice low and distorted. You are not welcome here. Exit immediately. By 2:01 a.m., the first child was crying. The youngest screamed when the bathroom faucets shot to life, spraying the mirror like something unseen had yanked the handles. Craig tried the front door, but the delay on the smart lock kept it sealed just long enough for panic to settle in. Upstairs, Celine yelled over the noise, trying to herd her kids out of the bedroom. She tripped on a motion trigger in the hallway, and the voice changed, security protocol escalating. Leave now! In the sunroom, Marla stumbled backward, her drink crashing to the floor as the overhead speakers hissed a breathy whisper. This is not your home. The hallway camera caught her reaching for the walls like they might stop spinning. Celine grabbed her by the wrist and dragged her toward the kitchen. The lights there blinked in a fast, unnatural rhythm, and the ceiling projector cast long shadows across the countertops, shadows that didn't match anyone in the room. By the time they got the front door open, everyone was shaking. No one had shoes on. The kids were still crying. They piled into the car and backed down the driveway, fast and crooked gravel kicking up behind them. At 6:12 a.m., 2 officers knocked politely on the door. One walked through every room with a flashlight. The other watched the security monitors. They left half an hour later. The report said no signs of forced entry, no occupants on site. Smart system possibly malfunctioning. At 7:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. Blocked number. I answered anyway. What did you do? Marla's voice cracked. I sipped my coffee and looked out the window. Nothing, I said. I wasn't even there. I ended the call before she could respond. Then I opened the app and tapped Reset Sequence just in case they tried again. They came into the notary office like they still had a chance to win. Marla, with her lips pressed tight, Celine, 2 steps behind, arms folded across her chest like she was holding in a monologue. Craig didn't come. Neither did the kids. Just the 2 of them, convinced this would end in some forced compromise. Bradley the notary greeted them professionally and gestured to the seats across from me. Papers already sat stacked in front of him. He looked calm. I felt the same. Marla didn't bother with small talk. So, let's stop playing games. Celine leaned forward. We want to discuss next steps regarding the house. You've made your point. Bradley nodded and turned to me. I slid the top document toward them. The villa is no longer mine, I said evenly. Ownership was transferred 2 weeks ago to Eastview Housing Collective, a nonprofit that supports transitional housing for women. I retain lifetime access, and no other party has any legal claim. Celine's mouth opened, but no sound came. Marla's face turned sharp. You transferred it, she hissed. I did. You'll regret this, Marla said. One day when you're alone and need us, I cut her off. You gave it away without asking. I just made it official. Bradley flipped through the next form explaining the time-stamped record of the deed transfer and notarized signature. Celine's eyes glazed over, but her hands clenched. You could have talked to us first, she said. We thought it was temporary. No, I said. You thought I wouldn't push back. You thought I'd swallow it like always. Marla stood up too quickly, knocking her chair back. That place was supposed to be for family. It was, I said quietly. But family doesn't strip the name off the door and pretend it was theirs all along. They left without another word. Bradley slid the remaining paperwork toward me for final signature. I signed, passed it back, and stood up. Thank you, I said. Outside, the air was clear. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe without bracing. I checked my phone. Nothing from Marla, nothing from Celine. Just a notification from the villa's security app. All systems idle. No activity detected. I arrived just after sunrise. The gravel crunched under the tires the same way it always had, but this time I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't brace myself for who might be inside. The only car in the driveway was mine. The lock turned smoothly. The kind of quiet welcome that doesn't ask where you've been or who you had to become to get here. Inside, the air smelled like cedar and a little bit of dust. Nothing was out of place. I spent the morning pulling down everything Reese and I had installed. Motion sensors, strip lights, speakers tucked into corners, the projector in the hallway that once made shadows dance where nothing moved. I labeled each piece carefully, packed it into a box, and set it aside for return. The house didn't need to speak anymore. It had already said what I hadn't been allowed to. Loud enough to echo. I made coffee not because I needed the caffeine, but because the sound of the percolator had always made the place feel like mine. I used the mug with the chip in the handle, the one Dad used to call Lucky. He never explained why. He just smiled when it was clean again. Outside the porch caught the early light. I sat in the chair he built, the one with the armrest that still creaked when you leaned too hard. I wrapped both hands around my coffee and let the steam blur my view of the trees. No one was shouting. No one was asking for anything. No one was waiting for me to cave. I wasn't proud of what I did, but I wasn't sorry either. They had come to take something I'd built alone. I didn't lock them out with rage. I just gave the house permission to say what I couldn't. I took a slow sip, then whispered into the morning, not revenge. Just return. The lake glittered in the distance like it knew something I didn't. I sat there until the coffee cooled, not needing to answer to anyone, not even myself. Then I stood up and walked back inside.